My name is Margaret Avery, and the night I brought my son into this world, I did it alone. No hand to hold, no voice telling me to breathe. Just the steady beeping of hospital monitors, the cold smell of antiseptic, and the quiet terror of realizing the person I trusted the most had already chosen someone else. It didn't happen suddenly. I think most heartbreaks don't. They erode slowly grain by grain until one day you wake up and realize the shore is gone. But even then, I didn't expect that night to go the way it did. I didn't expect the call. I didn't expect the silence that followed. And I sure didn't expect the picture I would see the next morning, when everything I thought I knew about my marriage collapsed into something sharp enough to cut through bone. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the day before. It was late February, the kind of cold that makes the windows rattle and the air feel thin. We lived in a small town outside of Cedar Falls. Not the kind of place where things happen, really. The kind of place where you know who bags your groceries and you wave to the same mailbox every morning on your walk. The kind of place where people say, "You two are solid," and you nod along, because for the most part, you believe it too. My husband's name is Daniel. We'd been married nearly 20 years. We met in our late 20s, two people who believed love was simple if you were honest and tried your best. For most of our marriage, that felt true enough. We had a mortgage, a golden retriever Sunday, pancakes, the sort of quiet life that older folks say is steady. And I liked steady. I grew up in a house where love was loud doors slamming, tears thrown like grenades. I promised myself I'd choose differently. And I did. Or I thought I did. I was 39 weeks pregnant when Daniel got the call. I remember I was folding laundry in the living room. The late afternoon sun was coming in through the blinds, making everything look warmer than it felt. My back hurt, my feet were swollen. The kind of discomfort that feels like the final stretch before something big. Daniel was in the kitchen finishing up a report on his laptop, the keys clicking in that distracted rhythm I had learned to love, because it meant he was close by. Then his phone rang. I didn't give it much attention at first. Calls happen, work happens. But as soon as he answered, the air shifted. His voice dropped softer in that way people get when they don't want someone to overhear. He came into the living room with a look I couldn't name, something tight around his mouth. "Margaret, I need to go. Something came up at work. It's last minute. They need me in Des Moines tonight, right away." I laughed at first, a tired end-of-pregnancy laugh. "Tonight, Dan, I'm due any day." "I know," he said, and he put his hands on my shoulders like he was steadying me, though maybe he was steadying himself. "It'll be quick. I'll be back by tomorrow night." "I promise." You'd think I would have questioned it. Des Moines is only 2 hours away. Video calls exist. Why him? Why now? But I had loved this man for 20 years. I had believed him for 20 years. When you love someone, that long trust doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like breathing. So I nodded. I told him to be safe. And I kissed him goodbye. That night, the contractions started. I tried calling him, but his phone went to voicemail. I tried again and again. Then I stopped. I didn't have time to panic. I didn't have the luxury to fall apart. My body took over, and I drove myself to the hospital. I don't remember much about the car ride, except gripping the steering wheel and praying for all the women who had ever done this before me. In the hospital, the nurses were kind. They called me sweetheart and honey in that familiar Midwest way that makes everything feel like it might be survivable. One of them held my hand when the pain got unbearable. Another wiped my forehead and told me I was doing beautifully. I focused on their voices, not the absence of his. The birth was long, the hours blurred. And then there he was, my boy, my son. This small, warm, blinking miracle with a tuft of dark hair and a tiny cry that sounded like the first note of a hymn. I held him close. I counted his fingers. I whispered, "It's okay, I've got you, I've got you." There was love in that room. Real love. True love, the kind that doesn't leave. I didn't think about Daniel until morning. Around 7 a.m., the nurse rolled me to the recovery room. Sunlight was coming in soft and gentle through the blinds. I was holding my son against my chest when I picked up my phone. One notification. Instagram. From her. His secretary. Young, polished, always laughing a little too loud at his jokes at the Christmas party. A photo. Her head resting on a shoulder, I knew better than my own reflection. No caption, just a glass of whiskey, 2 hands touching under the table. The world didn't explode. It didn't crack open. It just shifted. Like gravity had rearranged itself without warning. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just typed, "Stay with her forever." Hit send. Then I held my baby a little closer. Because that's what you do when the world breaks. You hold on to what's real. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the air system and the occasional shuffle of nurses' shoes down the hallway. I remember thinking that the world should have sounded different after everything I'd just realized. Like maybe thunder would roll in, or a glass would shatter, or the earth would tilt. But it didn't. It just continued, soft, slow, almost gentle, as though my life hadn't just split clean down the center. I sat there in that hospital bed with my newborn son sleeping against my chest. He was so small, so impossibly warm, his breath steady in that way newborns breathe soft like a feather brushing against your skin. I remember the weight of him. There are some feelings the body memorizes, and that was one of them. The weight of your own child, it settles into your bones. It stays there. The phone lit up again. Another notification. Then another, then call after call. Daniel? 40 missed calls in the span of 15 minutes. It should have meant something. It should have stirred anger or grief or panic or something. But instead, I felt strangely calm. Not numb, just steady. Like I was standing at the center of a room while everything else moved around me. The nurse walked in quietly, carrying a clipboard. "Mom and baby doing okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. Mom. The word almost knocked the air out of me. I was a mother. No matter what Daniel had done, no matter where he was or who he was with, this was real. This baby in my arms was real. The steady rise and fall of his chest, the tiny hand curled into a fist on my gown real. "We're okay," I answered. And I meant it. The nurse took my vitals, checked, the baby smiled softly. She must have seen something in my face because she didn't ask questions. Good nurses know when silence is a kind of dignity. After she left, I finally let myself look at the phone. The voicemails were long and frantic. His voice was breaking. He was pleading, swearing, apologizing, explaining. As if explanations mattered now. I didn't listen to more than a few seconds. I just pressed delete, one by one. I wasn't interested in hearing the story he had rehearsed on the drive home. I had already seen the truth, and the truth was in a photograph for the world to see. A photograph doesn't panic. A photograph doesn't lie to protect itself. A photograph just is. I looked down at my son's face. His eyelids fluttered as he dreamed. Maybe about nothing at all. Maybe about everything he had heard in my heartbeat. I whispered to him, "You and me, sweetheart, we're going to do this right." My hand was steady. My breathing was steady. I felt like I had stepped into a version of myself I didn't know existed. Not hard, not bitter, just clear. At around 9, I asked the nurse for my phone charger. She plugged it into the wall for me, and I thanked her. Polite, calm. That's what people remember about this part that I didn't fall apart. But there's something folks don't talk about often. Sometimes strength comes in the quiet. Not the shouting, not the crying, not the dramatic exit. Just the quiet decision not to go back to what broke you. I called my sister next. She lived in Indiana, a good 8 hours away. Her voice came on groggy at first. "Maggie, everything okay?" "I had the baby," I said. "A boy." There was joy first, immediate and bright. She cried. I cried too, but not because of Daniel. Because of my son. Because he deserved love around him like sunlight. Because he deserved a mother who tried. Then her voice softened. "Is he there?" "No," I said, "just that." And she understood everything. "I'm coming," she said. "No, not right now. I don't want chaos. I don't want a scene. I just need today. Just today." She was quiet for a moment. "Okay, call me later. I love you." "I love you too." After we hung up, the baby stirred. I shifted to help him latch for feeding, and I remember thinking how remarkable it was that the body knows what to do, even when the heart is breaking. Milk let down, breath steadied. The world narrowed to skin and heartbeat and instinct. There was a knock on the door again. A new nurse. She had kind eyes. "Do you have someone coming to pick you up when you're discharged?" she asked softly. I paused. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because hearing the reality spoken aloud has a weight to it. "No," I said, "not yet. but I'll be fine." She nodded. No pity, just understanding. Real understanding. We see women like this in America more often than anyone likes to admit women who do the hard thing quietly. Women who choose dignity over chaos. Women who learn to let go before they are pushed. Around 11:45, my phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. "We're all set. I'll make the call at noon." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I just held my son and waited. At exactly 12:03, I imagined Daniel answering a call he never saw coming. Not from me. Never from me again. But from the consequence of his choices. I didn't need to be in the room. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to explain myself. The silence had done enough. And in that quiet hospital room, sunlight warmed my shoulders. My son breathing softly against my chest. I felt something like peace settling into place. Not happiness, not yet. But peace. A beginning made from an ending. A door closing, yes. But also a door opening. By the time the clock struck noon and I knew the call had already been made, the room felt different, like the air had cleared, like the storm I'd been standing inside of for hours had suddenly passed through to the next town on the map. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt steady. And in that steadiness, there was a kind of quiet power I had never known before. Maybe it comes with motherhood. Maybe it comes with betrayal. Maybe both. The phone didn't ring again for a little while. I knew why. He was talking to the lawyer. He was learning in the time it took to say the word infidelity that the world we had built together had just changed shape. And not because I shattered it, but because he did. I remember adjusting the blanket around my son. He was sleeping again, that peaceful newborn sleep, like he had never known a world with broken hearts, or disappointments, or promises that crack at the edges. I held him close, breathing him in. He smelled like cotton and warm skin and something new. Something pure. There was a knock at the door, and my doctor came in. Dr. Harding. Older man, kind eyes, gray hair hands that had delivered half the babies in town. The sort of doctor who calls you kiddo, no matter how old you are. "How are we doing, Margaret?" he asked, looking between me and the baby. "We're doing okay," I said. And I think we both knew the sentence held more layers than the words could carry. He nodded. "Good, that's good. You're doing beautifully." He checked my chart, examined my son, and then sat down for a moment. Not in a hurry, not rushing to the next patient. That's how you can tell a good doctor from a great one whether they sit. "You've got a strong one there," he said, nodding toward the baby. "I think so," I said, smiling a little. He came into the world on his own terms. He looked at me then. Not the clinical way doctors look at vitals or charts, but the way someone looks when they can tell you've walked through fire and haven't said a word about it. "You did too," he said. I felt the words settle inside me. Sometimes healing comes in the smallest acknowledgments. After he left, I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the steady beep of the monitors lull my breathing into rhythm. My hand rested gently on my son's back. I could have stayed in that moment forever, but the world has its way of reminding you it's still turning. The phone buzzed. Not a call this time. A text. From Daniel. "Please, just talk to me." I didn't respond. Another text. "It wasn't what you think." I let out a breath that was somewhere between a sigh and a laugh. Because that was the thing when someone says it wasn't what you think. What they mean is that it was exactly what you think, and they just want time to rewrite the story. I placed the phone face down on the bedside table. I didn't owe him my pain. I didn't owe him my voice. The next knock on the door came just after 1 p.m. It was my nurse again, the same one from earlier. She had a soft presence, like someone who knows how to move through the world without disturbing it. "Ready for some fresh air?" she asked gently. I nodded. She helped me into the wheelchair, lifting the IV line and guiding it carefully. I held my son in my arms as she pushed us into the hallway. The corridor was quiet sunlight spilling from the wide windows at the end of it. We moved slowly, and with each foot we passed, I felt a little more of my fear fall away. I wasn't walking out a broken woman. I was leaving a woman who knew her worth. We reached the small family lounge at the end of the hall. It had 2 armchairs, a love seat, and a coffee machine that probably brewed the same bitter coffee for 20 years. The nurse told me she'd be right outside the door if I needed her. I thanked her, and she left us alone. I sat in the armchair and looked at my son. The light touched his cheek in a warm, golden way, and in that moment, I felt something inside me settle like a piece finally clicking into place. I whispered, "Your life will be better than this. I promise you that." The phone buzzed again. I didn't pick it up, but I did glance. Voicemail 23 messages. New text 8 messages. Missed calls 51 total. It was strange because the longer I didn't answer, the easier it became. Once I would have felt obligated to fix things, to soothe, to explain. Years of marriage had trained me to be the one who smoothed over the cracks, who made everything all right again. But the truth was, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand still and refuse to run back into the burning house. Around 2:30, the nurse returned and wheeled us back to the room. My sister texted to say she'd be there the next day. I felt my chest loosen a little, knowing I wouldn't be alone when I went home. But even then, I wasn't truly alone. I had him. And I had me. That evening, as the sun set and the room fell into soft shadows, I held my son and looked out the window. The world looked peaceful again, as though it had paused just long enough for me to catch up. The phone rang once more. It rang a long time. It finally went silent. I didn't answer. Because I had already said the last thing I needed to say. I texted him stay with her forever. Everything else, every tear, every apology, every plea didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to the consequences he had chosen. And I was done choosing him. I was discharged the next morning. The sky was pale and overcast, the kind of gray that makes everything look quiet, like the world is holding its breath. My sister wouldn't arrive until afternoon, so the hospital arranged a van to take us home. The nurse helped me buckle the baby into the car seat they had loaned from the maternity supply closet, a temporary kind of kindness meant for circumstances like mine. Circumstances no one asks to find themselves in, but plenty of women do. The ride home was slow. The driver didn't talk much, and I didn't either. I just watched the familiar streets roll past the window. The little diner with the chipped red awning, the church with the bell that rings at noon, the barbershop where men gather to talk about weather and football. Everything was the same, and yet nothing was. That's the cruel thing about heartbreak. The world doesn't stop just because yours did. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw Daniel's car parked there. I didn't react. Not outwardly. Inside, something just steadied. The way a person braces for a wave, not to fight it, just not to drown. He must have heard the van door slide open, because he came out of the house fast, like he thought maybe he could undo something if he moved quickly enough. His hair was messy, eyes red shirt wrinkled. He looked exactly like a man who had just realized the permanence of his mistake. "Margaret," he said, breath-catching, "please, just please." The driver carried my bag to the porch while I lifted the car seat carefully. My son was asleep, unaware, untouched by the scene unfolding around him. I didn't look at Daniel. Not yet. I walked past him up the steps into the house I had lived in for nearly 2 decades. The air smelled the same lavender cleaner and old wood, but it didn't feel the same. It didn't feel like home. Home is where trust lives, and trust had already left. Once the baby and I were inside, I finally turned to Daniel. He stood in the doorway, hands shaking slightly, like he was trying not to grab something that didn't belong to him anymore. "Can I hold him?" he asked, voice almost breaking. For a moment, I just looked at him. It would have been easy to let anger answer. But anger is loud. And I was done being loud for someone who hadn't been there when I needed him. So I said, "You can sit. I'll hand him to you." He nodded, relief flooding his face, and he sat carefully on the edge of the couch. I placed our son in his arms, and for a moment, even after everything I saw, something familiar. The way his shoulders softened. The way he looked at the baby like he was something sacred. But love for a child does not erase betrayal of their mother. He looked up at me, eyes already full of questions. "Margaret, it wasn't." "No," I said quietly. "Don't." He swallowed hard. "I made a mistake." "No," I said again, my voice steady. A mistake is forgetting the milk at the grocery store. A mistake is a wrong turn on the highway. What you did was a choice. His face fell in a way that told me the truth had landed exactly where it needed to. We sat in silence for a long time after that. Not the kind of silence that begs to be broken. The kind that confirms something has ended. Finally, I spoke. I called the lawyer. He closed his eyes. "I know." I won't keep you from him, I said. I won't be cruel. I won't shut you out of his life. But I won't build a life with someone who couldn't come when I needed him most. He looked like he wanted to argue, to defend, to explain. But explanations don't stitch wounds, and I think he knew that. So instead he cried, quietly, not dramatically, just a man grieving the home he lost by leaving it. I didn't touch him. I didn't comfort him. That part of us was over. When my sister arrived later that day, she hugged me tight, the kind of hug that says I saw it happen, even if I wasn't there. She helped me settle into the bedroom, set up the bassinet brew tea. Daniel stayed for a while, held the baby again, then left when I told him it was time. He didn't argue. After he drove away, my sister sat beside me on the bed. We didn't speak right away. Some silences are soft. Some are necessary. You okay? She finally asked. I nodded. I think I'm becoming okay. We both laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was true. Over the next few days, we made a plan. A real plan. Not one made from panic or pain. One made from clarity. Custody schedule, financial accounts, house, bills, work leave, pediatric appointments. All the quiet adult decisions life requires, even when your heart is bruised. And somewhere in the middle of discussing shared calendars and insurance paperwork, I realized something. This was not the end of my life. This was the end of the part of my life that asked me to shrink. I didn't shrink anymore. I didn't beg, I didn't bargain, I didn't break. I became. Not harder, not colder, just clearer. And sometimes clarity is the bravest kind of strength. There are moments in life that don't announce themselves as turning points when they happen. They arrive quietly, the way morning light creeps into a room before anyone notices its sunrise. Weeks passed after I came home from the hospital. Days fell into a rhythm of feedings, warm bottles, diaper changes, soft lullabies spoken into the dim lamplight of early morning. My sister stayed the first week, then returned home, promising to visit again soon. And just like that, I found myself alone again, but this time not lonely. There's a difference. I learned how to do everything one-handed, warm a bottle, sort mail, answer the door, fold a receiving blanket. I learned the shape of my son's cries, hunger, tiredness, discomfort, that little whimper that meant he wanted to be held just because. I learned that love could be quiet and constant, like a steady train running through the night. Daniel visited as we had arranged, every Tuesday, Friday, and Sunday afternoon. Sometimes he'd stay an hour, sometimes a little longer. He was careful with the baby, gentle. In those moments, you could almost believe everything had been different. But I don't believe in almost anymore. He tried in the ways men try when they realize too late what they have lost. He brought groceries. He fixed the loose cabinet hinge in the kitchen. He swept the porch. Small offerings as though sweeping dust could sweep away the betrayal. But the thing about a broken bridge is no matter how steady your footing once felt, you don't cross it again. One Sunday afternoon he was late. I noticed, but I didn't call. I no longer rearranged myself around his unpredictability. He came in the door quietly, keys jingling, face pale. He looked thinner than before. Older, maybe. Or perhaps I was simply seeing him fully without the soft focus love puts around a person. He sat across from me in the living room. The baby slept in the bassinet, a faint little snore escaping his lips. The house was peaceful afternoon light glowing against the cream-colored curtains. Daniel cleared his throat. I broke it off, he said. I didn't react. I didn't ask who broke what or when or how. None of it mattered. Not anymore. When I didn't respond, he added, I thought you should know. Silence stretched between us. Not hostile, just honest. I rested my hand on the arm of the chair and spoke gently, not cold or sharp, just steady. Daniel, ending something with her doesn't rebuild what was broken here. His shoulders slumped, not dramatically, just honestly. A quiet collapse of hope. I know, he said, but I want to try. I want us back. The words were familiar words I had heard in movies, in other people's stories, in whispered conversations in grocery store aisles. Words said when someone realizes the door they assumed would always remain open had been shut and locked by the one who used to wait on the other side. I could have explained everything right then. I could have told him in long sentences and emotional confessions why I couldn't go back. But sometimes clarity is simplest when spoken plain. I loved you, I said, For a long time, I believed in us. But the night I needed you the most, you chose not to be there. And that changed something that can't be changed back. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. Not to silence him, but to steady the moment. It's not that I hate you, I continued. I don't. I don't even want you to suffer. I just can't trust you with my heart anymore. And a marriage without trust is just a contract with dishes and laundry. He looked down at his hands. His wedding band caught the light. He twisted it like a nervous habit. I didn't realize, he said softly, how much I was taking for granted. I nodded. Most of us don't until the thing we assume will stay doesn't. There were no tears, no raised voices, just two people sitting in the truth. He looked toward the bassinet. The baby stirred and let out a soft sigh, then settled again. I want to be a good father, he said. You can be, I said. And I will never stand in the way of that. He looked back at me. But I want to be your husband. I shook my head gently. That part is over. He closed his eyes. A quiet acceptance washed over him. The kind that comes when a person stops trying to rewrite what has already been written. We sat like that for a while. Just breathing. Just being. Two lives that had once been one, finally acknowledging the new shape of things. After a while, he stood. He walked to the bassinet and gazed down at our son. He placed one hand lightly on the baby's chest, not enough to wake him, just enough to feel the tiny heartbeat there. Then he whispered not to me, but to the child. I'll show up for you, I promise. And I believed him not because of words spoken, but because of the way his voice cracked ever so slightly on the word show. He left then, not slamming the door, not dragging his feet. Just left. Like someone who understood the conversation wasn't a battle lost, but a truth accepted. I sat there for a while after hands resting in my lap, listening to the quiet of the house. It didn't feel empty. It felt still. And sometimes stillness is the sound of healing beginning. Seasons changed in small, almost unremarkable ways. Spring came with the robins tapping at the window ledges, the thaw of the last stubborn patches of snow, and the scent of damp earth waiting to bloom. I was still learning how to be a mother. Not the way books describe it. Soft, lighting warm lullabies, everything folding neatly into place, but the real kind. The tired kind. The up at 3 a.m. praying he'll go back to sleep kind. The kind where you realize your body is capable of more strength than your heart thinks it has. I learned to move through the days without thinking too far ahead. The baby, whom I named Elias, became my calendar. Feedings, baths, the slow rocking rhythm that calms a child the way a tide calms a shoreline. He grew, slowly but surely. Small fingers searching for something to hold. Eyes bright and unfocused, then slowly learning to follow light. Meanwhile, life outside the house continued the way small-town life does, steadily, gently, with just enough curiosity to stir quiet conversations at the grocery store. People knew what happened. Not because I told them no, I never needed to, but because small towns have a way of knowing before words ever get spoken. A look here, a whisper there, the shared, tight-lipped sighs of women who have seen their own reflection in my story. Some pitied me, some admired me, some didn't know what to say, so they said nothing at all. I preferred the silence. Daniel came regularly as we arranged, Tuesdays, Fridays, Sundays. He was never late now. Neighbors noticed. I knew they did. There was something about the way porch curtains sometimes shifted when his truck pulled up. The way conversations paused just slightly when I walked by with Elias and his stroller. Not cruel, just curious. Humanity trying to make sense of something fragile. Daniel would knock softly, always the same rhythm, 3 taps a pause, 1 more. He rarely crossed the threshold without asking. He held Elias with care, with gentleness, with a reverence that softened him in ways I hadn't seen before. There was love there. There had always been love. Just not the kind that stands steady when the storm comes. Sometimes we talked, mostly about practical things. His next doctor appointment is Thursday. I bought more formula. It's in the pantry. Would you like to take him to the park today? Nothing sharp, nothing sentimental, just parenting. He apologized once more early on. I listened, really listened. Then when he finished, I said quietly, I heard you. Not forgiveness, not anger, just acknowledgement. Forgiveness is not a single act. It is a process. And sometimes the first step is simply refusing to keep bleeding. On Wednesdays, I started attending a small mother's group at the local library. Folding chairs, coffee in styrofoam cups, babies fussing, lullabies hummed under breath. We shared stories, the sleepless nights, the fears, the small victories. Some were single mothers, some were married, some were divorced. Some were doing everything alone, even while someone slept on the other side of the bed. One of the women, Linda, gray hair pinned back in a clip, hands always smelling faintly of vanilla lotion, said something one afternoon that sat in my bones for days. Some people think healing is loud, but I think it's quiet. I think it's choosing peace every morning, even when you wake up hurting. That was it. That was exactly it. Healing wasn't dramatic. It wasn't triumphant. It was mundane. Day by day, breath by breath. Some days I would stand at the kitchen sink washing bottles and feel grief move through me in a wave so gentle it almost felt like memory. Other days I'd step outside into the yard, feel the sun on my face, and realize I hadn't thought about pain at all. Daniel kept his word. He showed up. He didn't push. He didn't ask for what could not be returned. And I kept growing. I learned new routines. I learned how to cook one-handed and hum a lullaby while the kettle whistled. I learned how to sit on the porch in the evenings, Elias asleep against my chest, and just listen to the wind rustle the maple leaves overhead. Sometimes Daniel would watch from the sidewalk, not intruding, not approaching, just witnessing the life continuing inside a home that used to be his. Not as punishment, just truth. Summer brought longer days and the smell of lilacs. I took Elias to the park, the soft green grass cradling us like a reminder that growth happens even after the frost. Mothers nodded at each other knowingly as we swayed on the bench swings. Toddlers shrieked with laughter. Life was happening. It was happening everywhere. One evening, as the sun slid low and gold across the horizon, I sat on the back steps with Elias sleeping in my arms. The sky was streaked in pink and peach soft like a faded quilt. And I realized I was not angry anymore. Not because what happened was small. Not because it didn't break me. But because I chose not to carry the damage any longer. There is a difference between remembering and reliving. I remembered, but I was not living inside the wound. I looked down at my son's face, soft, peaceful, full of unspoiled trust, and I whispered, "We are going to build a beautiful life, you and I. Not perfect, not pain-free, but honest, steady, whole." I did not rebuild what was broken. I built something new. And that is a different kind of strength. Autumn came. The air turned crisp, the kind that makes you pull your sweater closer around your shoulders. The maples along our street turned shades of rust and gold, their leaves falling like quiet confessions onto the sidewalk. Elias was 6 months old by then. He could sit up with help, reach for things, smile in that gummy, earnest way babies do when they recognize their world is safe. I had settled into a rhythm that felt less like survival and more like living. I woke up, made oatmeal brewed coffee, washed bottles, and swayed Elias on my hip while the morning sun slanted through the kitchen window. I had learned to expand my world slowly. Short walks, grocery runs, Sunday services, library story hour. Nothing grand, just life. One crisp Saturday morning, I decided to take Elias to the fall festival at the town square. There were pumpkins lined up in rows, bales of hay stacked into pyramids. The smell of cinnamon and apple cider drifting through the air. Children ran with their jackets flapping open, laughter carrying on the breeze. It was the kind of day where life feels simple in the exact way you want it to. I was standing near a booth selling knitted hats when I heard someone speak my name. "Margaret?" I turned. It was her. The secretary. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes, her shoulders drawn in toward herself. She wasn't the bright, laughing woman I remembered from the office holiday party. There was a heaviness in her expression, not guilt exactly, but understanding. A person who had learned something they hadn't wanted to learn. She looked at Elias, then back at me. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice quiet. I didn't feel anger rise in me. I didn't feel bitterness or accusation. Instead, I felt something surprisingly gentle. "Yes," I said, "we can talk." We walked a few steps away from the crowd, standing near the old oak tree at the far edge of the square. Elias was asleep against my chest, one small hand curled into my sweater. She spoke first. I didn't understand what I was doing," she said. "I mean, I knew. but I didn't understand the weight of it. Not until it was too late. I nodded. She didn't need to convince me. The truth had already lived in my house. I didn't need it explained. She swallowed. He told me he'd left emotionally, that he stayed for the baby, that he was lost. I let her speak. Sometimes people need to hear themselves say the thing out loud to understand what it means. She wiped her cheek, embarrassed. I thought I was the beginning of his new life. But it turns out I was just the ending of the old one. I looked at her then, not as the woman who had shared a hotel room with my husband, but as a woman who had been young, naive, hopeful, and wrong. Life is full of people who make poor choices because they want to feel chosen. I said, only I hope you learn from it. Not sharp, not cruel, just true. She nodded. And for a moment there was a quiet between us that didn't feel like tension. It felt like release. Then she said something I didn't expect. You handled it with so much grace. I thought you'd scream. I thought you'd fight me. I shifted Elias slightly, his cheek pressing closer to my collarbone. My fight is for him, I said, brushing my hand across his tiny back. Not for anything already gone. She nodded again. Tears tracked silently down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered. And I believed she meant it. I didn't forgive her, not fully, not instantly. Forgiveness isn't a door you unlock and swing open. It is small hinges turning slowly over seasons, but I felt something loosen inside me. The kind of loosening that makes room for air again. We parted without dramatics. No emotional scene, no promises, just two women walking away from a place neither of us could stay. That evening, Daniel came by for his usual visit. He held Elias in his arms, humming a lullaby I had sung the night before. For a moment, the house felt familiar again. Not like the past trying to return, but like the present finding its rhythm. When he handed Elias back to me, he spoke softly. You're doing a wonderful job with him. I nodded. We both are. A new kind of peace settled between us, not reconciliation of marriage, but reconciliation of purpose. We were no longer partners, but we were parents. And that was enough. Over the next months, that peace grew. We learned how to co-parent without bitterness, without tugging, without forcing. We learned to let the child feel whole. I didn't love Daniel anymore, not the way I once had. But I didn't hate him either. Hate is heavy, and I had a child to carry. The years will unfold. Elias will grow. One day he will ask about the early days of his life. And I will tell him not with anger, not with venom, but with gentle truth. Your father and I were young once. We made promises, and sometimes promises break. But what we never broke was the love for you. Because healing real healing isn't about erasing what happened. It's about choosing what comes next. And what came next for me was peace. A quiet home, steady mornings, sunlight warming a kitchen floor as I hold a child who knows only love. If you're listening to this and you've been hurt, betrayed, left behind, or made to stand alone when you deserved someone beside you, hear me when I say, your story is not finished. You are allowed to rebuild. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed peace. And sometimes silence is not emptiness. Sometimes silence is the beginning of becoming. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, if you saw yourself in it, you're welcome to stay to share your own story, or simply to rest here a while. You're not alone. The end.